Hey everybody, and welcome to Freehands Friday. Today is October 2nd, and we are doing a preemptive session with Tom SHAD as part of our Northeast November Freehands Friday sessions. And so, if you're familiar with the Blue Man Group or many of the other projects that Tom's been involved with, you're in for a treat. And we're also joined by Andy Prokopic, representing Fargo. So let's get underway. Tom, thank you so much for making time for us today. How's it going, man?
My pleasure. Thank you.
Good, good. So, there's a couple of, well, actually, I have so many questions. I always try to lead off with, how did you find out about the stick, or what do you love about the stick, or what do you hate about the stick? But these days, it's just tell me something about the stick that that we don't know. So I suppose.
I definitely cannot tell you something.
Yeah.
I cannot tell you anything that you do not know about the stick. I can tell you that you guys already have probably 100 times the knowledge I have of the Chapman stick. I'm one of the few people in the world who actually made his living playing Chapman stick for a while. So that was cool. How did I hear about the stick? Was Guitar Player. I guess it was 70 or maybe 80, I guess it was. I don't know when that first ad came out, but and I remember seeing Tony Levin on Fridays playing with King Crimson, and that was so cool. And going to 40s.
Wow, yeah. I remember Fridays.
Yeah, they did Elephant Talk, and that was so cool. I mean, and I was a relatively new bass player at that time, so I was just excited, and I went to Manny's on 48th Street in New York City. That's that used to be called Music Row. There are music stores there, but less diversity at this point. But there was a Chapman stick in the window of Manny's, and this guy was saying, "Oh yeah, I'm playing Chapman stick. It's the next step for bass players." And I said, "Okay, that sounds cool." And then I, of course, wanted one along with 8-string basses and fretless basses and piccolo basses and everything else. So
now, what were you doing? Were you a New York native, or what?
I grew up in New Jersey, right across the George Washington Bridge, in a town called Leonia, New Jersey.
Okay.
So my grandparents were in the city. Yeah.
Okay.
I saw a lot of music. I was really into music from a young age.
Now, were you waiting tables like me, or how did it all go down?
Waiting tables as an adult, or?
No, like when you were playing, when you were saving up to get instruments and stuff like that.
Well, let's see. The first bass, I could probably pull it out. I mean, if you guys have time, I can pull it out. I actually have it here.
Yeah, we want to see all that stuff. We love it.
It's an Ibanez bass. That I got in 1978.
Not a Flying V, is it?
No. No. It's this one, which is it's missing some parts, but this is the Ibanez Black Eagle, right? Wow. So it's just like a regular 4-string.
Can you hold it up a little higher so we can see the whole
sure,
body?
Of course.
Yeah. Oh, look at that. Okay, it's kind of like a jazz, but it's got some wicked cutaways.
It's a classic lawsuit.
Right. Yeah, and this was the same bass that Chris Novoselic used with Nirvana, but what I knew it for was that the Commodores used it. It had black tape wounds on it, and it had. I replaced the pickups on there. I replaced the bridge. I replaced the nut, and I broke part of the headstock. So, and that's. But that bass I've literally had for 35 years.
Now, is that the one I'm looking up at the Tom SHAD website? Which one is that?
I'd have to look. I don't even know. It's probably that one. If it's a black bass.
There's a pretty. Yeah, it's that one.
I have a lot of basses, so. Sometimes I don't even. When people say, "Well, there's that you played that bass on that gig," and I'll have to ask because I sometimes, I go through phases. I think that I don't know if stick players have as many instruments as bass players do or guitar players, but I'm a little bit more of a one stick guy, but probably a 14 bases guy. So,
Andy, you want to talk about that?
Well, can't say that's an uncommon thing. I got more bases than I know what to do with. I gotta start selling them off.
yep,
But
that happens. That happens. So, how did I save up? Well, I mean, my story of getting this, my original stick, the Ironwood, is not as honorable. I was going to Berkeley School of Music in '84, so I was in between semesters. Oh wait, was it '83? I think I finished my senior year of high school, if I'm remembering correctly, and I was in Boston at Berkeley, and Wurlitzer Music up there had a stick, and of course, it was not all that crowded in the middle of the day, and I'm playing the stick, and I'm like, I'm going to get this. So I just charged it to my dad's credit card, not really thinking about, paying him back. But, that was 83, 84, and I remember thinking, because I got free, the free hands book and everything. I'm like, oh, okay, well, I'm just gonna practice this like I practice bass. And my thing was, oh my God, this is really hard.
Yeah.
Like, this is really hard.
What was hard about it? Like when you first started,
the stretch for the chords.
The left hand or the right hand?
The left hand.
Yeah.
Because I'm used to, I can do my left hand like that, but that kind of stuff, some of the basic chords where you're essentially stretching the equivalent of almost two necks on those chords were hard for me.
Right, just to walk up a C scale in the left hand is like it's like these acrobatics.
But I'm talking about like the chords that are more like let's see if I can do this.
Just like the minor 7 chords and stuff like that.
Yeah, like the one that's like even this, and then moving this to anything else,
right.
without all of my, you guys know this, so that was hard, and I think that there was the novelty of it. People knew I had a stick, so I got asked to do a recording about a year, well, maybe it was 2 years later. An old friend of mine asked me to we recorded a cover of the Rolling Stones song "Voodoo" from Exile on Main Street, and I played stick on that. And I've never actually heard the recording, but I know I recorded on the stick.
Now, did you just show up with the stick, or was he like, I gotta have the stick, man?
Well, of course, he heard that I had a stick, so if you're the stick owner, then you, right? That's sometimes how it goes. I mean, a lot of people assume that just because I own a stick that I can, of course, play all the kingdoms and stuff. Which
there's other bands that use stick,
There are a couple. Not that many that people know. That's the problem.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. So, but so how did I save up for instruments? I mean, I think like I was just gigging. You know what I mean? And so money would come in, and then I'd buy whatever. I'd have a endorsement, which means you're paying something, but you're not paying full price for something. So I'd pick up an instrument here or there, and then I would just fall in love with another instrument. And of course, I never wanted to sell any of them. Got some on tour, you know what I mean? Pawn shops, that kind of deal.
So now, when you were traveling and working at a Jersey or New York, like, would we recognize any of the acts that you were playing or performing with, or?
You'd have to be pretty deep in the indie rock history. There was a band called Dump Truck that I played bass in from back in the '80s, like the mid '80s, and that was they were a pretty well known band at that time. I was the kid in the band at that time. I got the gig, I think, at 22, and then we were in Wales and the whole deal of record. We toured the U.S. and some of Canada, and we went to London and did a bunch of gigs, and that was cool. So that was that, and then I did. Just trying to think. I mean, Blue Man is easily the most known thing that I've done.
Right. Yeah.
But these days, I mean, sort of the internet and everything, it's sort of easy. If you're interested, if somebody's doing something, I mean, as you guys know, one of you guys, if somebody's like, oh man, you should check out this guy, then I'll check out whoever, or woman, I'll check out that person, and if I dig them, it doesn't matter if they have 2 hits on their YouTube page. I'm gonna go and listen. I'm gonna search them out. That's the beautiful thing about this day and age. It used to be that guitar player was the only way. And this kind of thing is a way of like fellowship and learning from each other that we can't, that we can't do otherwise.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, I agree. And it's hard because with certainly with the Chapman stick, there's really one place to buy one. I mean, you can get them on eBay, yeah.
Right.
You can get them through Craigslist or whatever it is. It's not quite as common, but oftentimes that first step, as you noted, was a big step.
Mm-hmm.
And am I going to like this thing? Am I going to hate this thing? Look at Andy. It's like taking over his life. He's selling off all his bases left and right.
Mm-hmm.
He knows it's true. You're laughing, but you're thinking about your next stick, right?
So, big deal.
I did the same thing, man. I just sold my 66 Bassman amp. I was just like, I just let it go. I was like, it's this classic piece of American history. I was like, I don't want it anymore. Like, I never use it. I can't get, a good sound. If I had like a Fender Strat and I was playing blues in a band or something like that, I could definitely use something like this. But for me, I'd rather go out and get an alto, or I'd rather go and get some music software to record or something like that.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think what it comes down to for me is, that's what I was thinking about, like what would I want to talk about in this interview is it really comes down to musicianship, that ultimately if I have whatever, a stick bass or an alto stick or a fretless guitar or whatever, like ultimately I remember seeing Greg Howard a bunch of years ago and seeing that he had a bass player in his band also, and I was like, well, how's that going to work? Because there's all the low stuff, but Greg is musical as hell, and it was incredible. It was incredible because he was sort of conscious of the voicings that the bass player was playing, either doubling or doing other stuff, and that's where for me that's where the stick is. I mean, there's sort of like there is like the really cool thing that we all have, that low C sharp or that we can play that sort of no other instrument really does quite like that timbre. But aside from that, like I have to be bringing something to the table, compositionally, musically, musicianship wise, and I think somebody like other great examples, Dale. Is another person who sort of had this vision and it's just being executed on the stick. You know what I mean? As opposed to being, it's cool to geek out on stick, but it's like ultimately like what music are you bringing to me? That's, it doesn't really matter, what instrument it is. It has to be speaking to me musically.
So last week we had a cat named Andy Silvanos from Australia who's really quite musical. And he has that quality that you're speaking of, where he picks up the instrument and you close your eyes and it just sounds like music. It doesn't sound like stick. He's not playing the stick. And I remember that he corrected me on a post that I made on the Stickist, and it was like, 1 year from now, what is the stickist that you want to be? And he corrected me and he said, what is the musician that you want to be? And he made that delineation, and I was like, he's right. He's right, because just because you have one doesn't mean you're a stick player. And I had that lesson. I had some hard lessons, where I was like, shticking. I was a shtick player, and it was really more like, I have this thing, but I haven't really found out where it fits in with what I'm doing.
Right. Right. Absolutely. That was sort of even, and I don't ever mean to be rude to people, but and I'm one of many stick players for Blue Man, where somebody will come up to me after the show and they'll say, "Well, that was great stick playing," and I'll think, "Well, no, it wasn't great stick playing. It was, it hopefully served. I'm glad that you enjoyed what we played, but like, there are people, I'm essentially playing piano like this. For the show, we're only playing the bass side of the instrument, and it's musical, and that's cool. But like, it's, is it great stick playing? I don't know. It's not virtuosic stick playing, that's for sure.
Well, we all can't be Bob Culbertson.
No, we can't. Although he's a total sweetheart, really nice guy. I met him in NIM, I guess about I don't even know how many years ago, maybe 12, 14 years ago. you know, real sweetheart, you know.
Yeah, he's a great guy. So he's
Yeah.
he's been pretty instrumental in terms of making the Free Hands Academy.
Uh-huh.
You know, I refer to him a lot. I'm like, Greg, you know, we have this time. What should we do? He's like, do this. You know, never do this, and you should try to do this. Like, you know, like, so he's been a fantastic resource for everyone in the stick community. I mean, not to mention, you know, the Step About and all the fantastic videos that he does and the books and stuff like that. So it's getting Greg to stop talking about the stick that's the real trick.
I mean, I think that also, and then Don Schiff also, like, that these guys, like, that they're really, I know that in Bob's videos he talks a lot about sort of independence of the hands and all that stuff, but again, it's like, if I'm doing something like that, there's sort of like the out-of-the-box quality of the stick, which is cool, you know what I mean? But like, there's sort of how Leo Fender designed the guitar, and then there's what Jimi Hendrix did with the guitar. And like, in other people, you know, I haven't done that much exploration actually with the stick. I know some people are doing MIDI stick and all that. Like, you know, are people really interested in like in finding something beyond just the sort of the dancing bear thing? You know, like, what else does the bear do? You know? And I think that there's a lot more, you know, and it's a young instrument, and, you know, but we certainly have this in the bass community, solo bass community, where something is very, very technically awesome. But, you know, is there something musical, you know, that's going to sort of hold me, like you say, as a listener, just as a person, you know? I don't. For me, it's not enough for somebody to say, you understand what you're doing. I don't understand that, so I can't comment on it. It's my responsibility as a composer and a player to communicate and get through to people. You know.
You must get that a lot, where it's like, oh, what is that you're playing? You know, like, do you have, you know, do you get that question, or do people think it's a sitar? I mean.
Yeah, I've both of those things, and. Yeah, they ask that, and then they're not that. Yes, Victor Wooten. Yeah, you know, there are. I mean, there are people where I think even Victor, who I really dig him, and he's a really great guy, and all that. Like that, I think some of his stuff is just so extremely musical, and some of it, for me at least, like it just wasn't like. There are very few albums that I come back to and I listen over and over and over and over and over again. And this is just my taste. I'm not an arbiter of any absolute musicality or ability or whatever. But like, you know, I come back to Nick Drake. I come back to the Beatles. I come back to...
Dude, Andy, he said Nick Drake.
I heard it.
He said, so funny story, true story. The one song I played for Andy.
Oh, really?
At the Free Hands Academy. I played him one song, Riverman.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a huge fan.
Yeah, there's a quality that Gabriel Garcia Marquez wrote about called Duende, you know, and it's like heart, you know, like that I hear it in Aretha Franklin's music, you know what I mean? Like there's something. Now, look, people have to develop, they have to go on their sort of journey or whatever, but like for me right now, at this point in my life, it's much more, it's not about being flashy, it's about connecting and you know, and having that connection with the audience, you know, and I can do that in a simple way. It doesn't necessarily have to be and P.S. I'm not going to be virtuosic on the stick, so that's, you know.
But if it doesn't, okay, so. One of my favorite quotes, and like I hear what you're saying about Victor Wooten, and interestingly enough, Victor Wooten. So the VIX camps were kind of a model that I used for the Free Hands Academy. So I went out and looked at his site, and I looked how things were set up. You know, they had yoga. You know, hey, we can get yoga too. You know, you know, it turns out that Emmett's, you know, daughter Diana teaches yoga, and she's fantastic at it. She has all these stretches for yoga players. So. You know, Victor Wooten, and I remember seeing Victor Wooten after the first album came out, after the first Flecktones album came out. He was the original quartet, and they're at the Playboy Jazz Festival, and I think that Etta James was playing, Ray Charles was playing. It was insane. Tower of Power, This would have been like 89, 90 or something like that. Incredible. And so it's kind of early in the day. The Flecktones has that kind of like 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock slot, and so people are still getting there, and they're rolling it with their coolers and their kind of homemade Midori margaritas and stuff. And the Flecktones get out and they do their thing, and they play that track that Victor Wooten told, the something Inspector, I can't remember the name of it, but he starts playing a bass solo, and he walks to the kind of the front of the stage, and it's the middle of the day, so the place is like maybe at 40%, maybe 50% capacity, and he starts drawing a crowd. Like people start actually leaving their seats and walking up to him at the Hollywood Bowl, which is uncommon because people are like in boxes up there, and so all of a sudden he's this rock star, and then in the middle of the solo he flips his bass around, and it's on a wireless, and I was watching him when he did it, and there was no pause. And so I was like, well, I don't know how anyone ever is going to top that ever. And then, as he's playing, he's getting ready to wrap up the bass solo, you can tell like the electricity's building in there. He does a backflip. He does a backflip, and so I was kind of, I can just go home now, like I can just go home now, but his whole thing is he's a technical player, and so it's that whole kind of Chick Corea, Dave Weckl kind of thing, and he's got something to say.
Yeah, while I agree with that he's a technical player, I think he really shines in his live shows. Not to get more off topic here, but I saw him last May, and it was a band. You don't go there. You go there thinking you're going to see Victor Wooten. He's going to play a bunch of virtuoso stuff, but he's playing a band, and as Tom was saying, that the music was first, and then everything else was second.
Yeah. And I think it's also he's developed. He's not an old guy. He's developed this thing over the years, and believe me, no disrespect to Victor at all. And a bass player friend of mine, I'll shout out to her here, Ryan Medora in Nashville, turned me on to some sort of thing where he was doing this thing with it was so musical, just so amazing, and not it was technical, but it was sort of, John Coltrane, however many hours a day he practiced, he sort of transcended the technique. You know what I mean? It wasn't just, there's a saying when I studied poetry, who wins, the poet or the poem. If I'm an owner of a lot of different instruments I can't play, it doesn't mean anything. I need to be able to, if it's one bass to make that one thing, that's cool too. That's fine.
Yeah. So let me ask you. So a lot of times with the Chapman stick, and when we talk about the stick, and that's kind of something that we all have in common. But we all love music. Music is, we were attracted to it for some reason or another. Why music? Why? When did music come into your life, and what did it look like? And was there a band or an individual? Was it a woman? Was it hard liquor? What was it?
Well, that turned me on to music. As the story goes, that I was told I was dancing before I could walk. That I was sort of hanging onto the couch and bouncing up and down, and my daughter is 3 weeks old yesterday, and I can see, responds to music already. My mom was a folk singer, amateur folk singer, and she really, really loved music, and so, I was already sort of all the way in, and I remember announcing at 10 that I was going to be a professional musician. So, so I think that there's really, the answer is almost like, when was I ever not fully committed to playing? And the answer is no.
There's not much else you can do, really, right, Tom?
No, that's right. No, you don't. You generally don't want me working for you. No.
But if it's music, right? You're the man. You're Johnny on the spot.
I'm hopefully, yeah. I'm the guy who's who's going to deliver. And these days, I can ask what you need, actually. As opposed to when I was in my 20s, where I had all the answers. I am teaching at this point also. Like we have, besides privately, I also teach in a program in New York City called Come Join the Band, and we write music with little kids. Now, usually you're writing music for kids or helping them write, but you're not a collaborator. And so I'm learning within this to be a collaborator with other, with like 7-year-olds and 10-year-olds, and it's amazing to be able to say yes. I mean, these kids, one great example is these kids, these brothers, Richard and Isaac. They wrote a song called Jurassic Armageddon, and it was all about dinosaurs killing everybody. And and I helped them write the chorus. So it's sort of like Rage Against the Machine verse, and then the chorus was like Pixies, and I absolutely sort of helped them with that. And Jurassic Armageddon, they still play the song. It's so that you're talking about like. Having to learn a whole new language set, you know what I mean? Because for me, the idea of coming to a lesson unprepared, I generally never did that for the most part. And some of these kids, I think that they're just not, they don't necessarily have mentors, or parents parents don't know, actually, they're not bad people. They just don't know how to tell their children to practice or what to practice,
Right.
So it's sort of like learning.
I'm one of those parents, FYI. Like, I want my kids to play music so bad, but I don't make the time to do it, and I don't make time for them to do it. And
Shame.
I know it is, so I can totally relate to that.
But you know what? I mean, it's at the same time, it's like it has to be their muse, and that's the question I always have, which is sort of chicken or the egg. Like the kids who are sort of forced to practice. I mean, I remember giving my mom real guff, where she would say, "That's it," and and I'd say, "Yes, that's it," and I mean, my friends who practice 6 hours a day are much better musicians than I am. That's just what it is.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? But
so basically, all your Asian friends are better cellists, pianists, and violinists.
Asian friends. I mean, I have friends who are violinists and cellists. They're not all Asian.
I'm teasing.
Yes, I know. But no, I mean.
The joke that I had an Asian friend, and they said that all Asian kids at the age of 6 get to choose piano, violin, sometimes cello, but like saxophone or marimba or drums, it's like not enough.
Mm-hmm. Well, then that brings up yet another sort of focusing on this, what I'd like to focus on with this, which is the kids. When I was a kid, 7 or 10, there was not the option to go and play with musicians who are like, that's great. Let's take your idea and develop it. Let's, slow you down. You're playing the bass too hard. You know what I mean? Like it was sort of, and actually for electric bass, I don't think that for little kids there were formal lessons when I was 7, so 71. You know what I mean? It just wasn't, it was sort of like, oh, you do that in the garage. But now there's more pedagogy and there's more community oriented. I mean, I think the jazz community has a lot of this, and the stick community hopefully too, where we share knowledge, but at the same time, your kids, they're going to have to make the decision for themselves. Like a lot of people say, oh, my daughter's name is Ruby, and they'll say, oh, well, when's Ruby going to get her hands on a bass? And I said, if she wants to, if she wants to. That's, you have to have, at least for me, at almost 50, you have to have ownership. You have to have ownership of what you do. Otherwise, it doesn't mean anything. Forcing children to make music. I mean, what a horrific thing. That's not what music is about for me. But along with that, I mean, and you guys, I think, had more desire to overcome the initial obstacles on stick. I mean, it's a bitch getting over those first couple of hurdles. It's like to watch somebody like Greg or whoever play. It's just like, oh, I'd like to do that. Well, that's okay.
And then you go to tune your stick, and you're like, wow, I can't even tune it. Like
right. Or how do I get a tone besides, or wow, I have to play. At least in my case, like wow, I have to play a lot harder than I thought I had to play. So, but so that's that. Yeah, and So anyway, yes. Next question.
So music was inevitable for you.
Yes.
You felt it, and it just felt right. And it sounds like the stick was just one of many kind of tangents that you made along the way. You know, it was like bass was kind of your bread and butter, but
Yeah,
it
it
was.
was.
I think it was. You know, there's a lot of now. I don't see you too much like now. Are you aware? You're aware of the Stickist, right? Okay. So the Stickist is a very popular Chapman Stick forum. And so a lot of times you'll see the Blue Man Group come up, and there'll be this, there's this kind of head scratching, like who is that guy? And so here comes the Blue Man Group question, right?
Okay.
So there'll be a whole bunch of kind of pieces to this, but I'll start with, what is the Blue Man Group?
Well, I would just direct people to bluemangroup.com for
Okay.
that. I work there. I love the show. I love the music. I'm a fan.
Okay.
But I do not in any way, shape, or form speak for the organization.
Got it.
And to describe the show, it's sort of hard. If you've seen it, it's a performance art show. The band are quasi characters in the show, you know, where we have face paint and costumes and all that stuff. But
So let's talk about the band.
Yeah.
How big is the band?
Well, in New York, the band is 3 people at one time. So there's a drummer, and then I'm playing Chapman stick, electric bass, and talking drum.
Okay.
And then there's another guy playing guitar, an 83-string electric zither. But yeah. So,
Okay.
so the ranges of the zither and the stick cross over, so it's sometimes hard to understand who's playing what.
Right.
In the show. But getting back to sort of entering into this, which is that I was at a birthday party, 91, I guess, for my friend David Hamburger, and you know, I heard somebody say something Blue Man Group Chapman Stick sub, and I just walked in the room and I said, because I owned one, I said I play Chapman Stick, and you know, and as the saying goes, I wasn't fired for a long time, you know, so yeah.
Cool. So was that there in New York?
That was in Brooklyn.
Okay.
Yep. And then I started on the show in December of 1991.
91.
Yeah.
Wow. So now when they're in New York, they call you up?
We are in New York. Oh, well, so there are concurrent shows in New York, Boston, Chicago, Vegas, and Orlando. Those are the sit-down shows in the U.S. Then there's also a U.S. tour that's going around, which is a slightly different thing. And then there are shows, and I don't know if I'm going to get all this right. So I think I don't represent Blue Man. I think that there's a show in Berlin still. I don't know. There was one in Tokyo, and there was something in Austria or something, and there was one in London.
Okay.
I don't know what we
Do those recur, or are they seasonal, or?
Well, the New York show has been there since November '91, and installed and been running since then. I think it's the second longest running off-Broadway show.
Wow. So do they own the building now? I mean, do they or
Yes.
essentially? Because then.
Literally. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Because it's now I confess I have not seen the show.
Uh-huh.
So I've seen some video of the show. And it looks really fun, and it looks like really exciting. And my mom would go to take me to see like Mum and Chance and the.
Oh. That's so funny, but can I interrupt you for a second?
Sure.
Mum and Chance I saw as a child at about 9. That was my favorite show. I loved it. I still love it. I think they're ridiculously talented.
Yeah.
Blue Man was the close. I remember saying to people when I first saw it in '91, this reminds me of Mum and Chance.
Mm-hmm.
That was the only thing that was like Blue Man. Because there's a form of mime, and I'm going to get the name wrong. It's like neo something mask mime, and it's a European form of mime based in mask work, and Yeah, and Blue Man kills it. They're great. You know.
Yeah, yeah, that's what I hear. So now, so like your role in that. So, do you still perform with them, or do you perform with them
Yes.
sometime? Or okay,
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. This week I'm doing. Let's see. Officially, I think no, sorry. Officially 7 shows this week.
okay,
I'm subbing on it, so that means that some weeks I do none, some weeks I do one, some weeks I do 5.
okay.
You know, it's whatever's needed.
I see.
Yeah.
And are there? Okay, so this is fascinating to me. I mean, like
Yeah.
there's this kind of bubble that is. And now, are there other stick players all over the world that for which charts are written that they have to
No.
learn?
No charts.
Okay.
It's all oral.
Okay.
It's all oral. Yeah.
So you've worked this out with the other 2 players and
No, I
the
mean,
group as well, or
well, you're basically trained into the show. It's sort of like, although I was going to use Zappa as an analogy, but they read music. But you essentially have to sort of memorize the show, and so you play it in parts, and it's trial by fire. And I remember when I first played the show, I was so nervous that my hands were all sweaty, and I don't sweat all that much in my hands, other parts, but I was using talcum powder because I was like so nervous, and playing the stick under black light. I mean, you really have to know the instrument, So that was hard, to know where the frets are and all that stuff. And we use tape like fret markers, just so I can feel with my finger where I am. So and there are in New York there are 1, 2, 3, 4 guys who play the role essentially, for the stick.
And they all play stick and bass and
Yes,
talking drum.
That's the role. Yeah.
That's the role. Okay.
That's the role. I mean, so it's the same as playing on the Chicago the musical or something. You have to play, I think, upright and tuba. So that's the gig.
Okay. Yeah, gig's a gig, right? Like, okay.
That's the gig.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. I mean, some gigs I've had to play keyboard, bass, and that's
Right. So, can you tell us, or I mean, like, could I ask, like, who are some of the other stick bass talking drum players in New York?
In New York?
Yeah.
Okay. We'll start with the newest guy in New York is Oliver Hofer, who's fantastic. He's a German guy, great bass player, and so he's one of them. The second newest, although none of these guys are really that new, is Jerry Kops, who's on the tour right now, and he's a badass guitar player also, and singer. And then the guy whose gig it is right now, the full-time guy, is named Dan Dobson, who's also a guitar player and sound designer. And me.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's interesting because they're not. These are names that, I mean, for me in the stick community, I don't even know, right?
Nope.
And that's because, just like so many other stick players, the first instrument that they came to is not the Chapman stick. They're, like you said, they're sound designers or guitarists, or it's like stick is part of what they do.
Unless you're Dale. If you're Dale, I mean, that's one thing that blew me away. Now, how do you pronounce her last name? Is it La Douceur?
It's a kind of a mystery. I've tried it, I'm so glad that you brought that up because I thought it was La Douceur, and I tried it, like making it sound very French. She's like, no, that's wrong. And I said, how about La Douceur? And I think I got close. And I'm glad that you brought up Dale. Tip of hat to Dale.
Yes, tip of hat, absolutely.
Because she's the one who turned me on. She's like, I think this guy Tom. You got to talk to Tom. So.
Yeah. She's and she's she's one of the few people who, at least as far as I understand her story, she's like, okay, I'm going to be a singer-songwriter and I'm only going to play Chapman stick, which is a ballsy move.
Yeah.
There are people, actually one person who did play the show who you have heard of, who was on the show for 3 years, was Khaki King, the guitar player. Do you know her? She's a tapper. Khaki, she's...
Oh, I think King, Kathy King?
No, Khaki King.
Khaki.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know her.
Yeah.
But I'll have to, they'll have to turn us on there.
Was it Dave, who's the... the guy who got into like a really horrible accident and lost like his brain function, the guitar player David Torn. David Torn produced one of her records, and
Oh,
yeah, she's really something else.
really?
So yeah, I remember when she came to the audition, she wiped the floor. I mean, she's this tiny, tiny woman, and we're like, okay, so blah blah blah. Here are the parts, and it was just no question. You know what I mean?
No, did you kind of train other stick players, or do you?
I trained, yes, I trained Dan and I trained Jerry, but there were other stick players that I trained. One guy, you might have heard of him from outside of Blue Man. What is his last name? Tom, who plays bass with Nico Case sometimes.
Tom Griesgraber?
No.
Oh.
Tom, I can't remember his last name, but he's a red-haired guy. He plays upright with her and with Nico Case. Anyway, so and John Langford of the Mekons. Anyway, but so I trained him and a bunch of other people who were sort of in and out of the gig. You know what I mean?
So are these people coming in as bass players and do they know they're gonna have to learn how to play the stick, or are they just like, so they come in knowing they're gonna have to do something that's completely not what they do?
Absolutely, and in fact, that's a great question, because there are now things are more formalized. Like when I was auditioning people, I mean, it's relatively similar, but they go to a certain location and then they're basically given a bass and it's like, okay, play this. Like they're just shown the part and then they have to play it, and if they make the second round, then they, I don't know if they play the stick even on the first round, and then there's a rhythm that they're basically shown on the stick. And what we do, actually, I can show you. Again, not representing Blue Man Group. We use this. We use a bass string that we cut about 9 inches, so that I'm basically creating a reverse bridge with my fingers and bowing the instrument.
Wow.
So that's if you've heard what they call the Mandelbrot rhythm. I don't have my amp plugged in or anything, but there's that's the main thing, and what it is it's a 16th note rhythm that generally is played anywhere between about 128 and about 148. So it's your time. Your time has to be really together to play that, because essentially you're the drummer.
Wow.
And the drummer is playing melodically around you.
Well, and that fits out. I mean, for stick players, that's a nice fit, right? I mean, because like essentially what you are doing is playing the drums when you're playing the stick.
Yeah, but the funny thing is that if you're doing, I mean, just to show you, like if you're. It's so, what we are used to, or I mean, I'll say we're used to doing this, right? We're used to doing this, but this is doing something else. This is doing this. Here, I'll do it up here, where you can see it.
Oh.
You heard 16th notes, so it's like da 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 da. And so it has to stay in time, and because it's in fifths, it's melodic, in a certain way. But it's challenging. I mean, I don't know about anybody else, but like coming to playing like as a bass player, I mean, sure, I'll turn on an envelope filter or I'll turn on a phase shifter. I mean, I come from being 14 in 1978, so it wasn't too much in the way of bass effects and using volume pedals. At least in my perception. So the idea of playing like a volume wah with a stick, was like, whoa, this is, because now I had to have foot coordination along with both of my hands.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So for certain people, for guitar players, I think, that they've been doing it for a certain amount of time, so it's a little bit easier.
Mm-hmm.
We also use EBow on the stick in the show.
Oh, really? Okay. Do you use that on the right hand or the left hand, or?
Well, we only play the bass side, so we're using it on what would be the left hand, but we're playing the C, G, D, A, E. We're playing the E string. We're playing the melodies on the E string, way up. So it's pretty much in like middle guitar range. So it's it's pretty high.
Is there do you play with pre-recorded tracks or pre-recorded drum
Yes.
parts and stuff?
No, live drummer, amazing drummers.
Okay.
I'll do a shout out to them. Again, not representing the show, but these are great players. Let's see, Clem Waldman is one of the drummers. Jordan Perlson is another one. Chris Schultz, who's Californian, just came to New York a couple of years ago. He's fantastic. And then Josh Matthews is the guy who has the chair. And these guys are seriously funky drummers.
Really? So, and I imagine they would have to be. I mean, it's like getting the Blue Man gig is kind of like getting the Blue Man gig. I mean, it's a long-standing gig, and there's a lot of integrity that comes along with the name, and
absolutely,
the show goes a certain way. Do they work in new things, or are there changes that they might make to the program?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think the changes happen. The large changes have happened about every 6 years.
I see.
So pretty much people, get to see the show, and then by the time, it's different, but it's not different like in 2 weeks.
I see.
And we have, that is the other thing that's amazing, is to be able to, actually, I think one of the guys from the Stick community, what is his name, from Minnesota, I'll have to think of his name.
Ben Oceans is the only Minnesotan Stick player I'm aware of at the moment.
Is it?
Well, his name is Ben. I don't remember his last name.
Not Ben.
He goes by Oceans in Space, so I don't know.
No. Let's see if I can put in some names and come up with. No, it's okay. It's not Bob. Anyway, well, I'll find it eventually. But yeah. So he's come a couple of, and most people have been at least 3 times, which that's something communicated to them, and that was great, and like I don't know about you guys, but like there's something really bizarre. I think that when I was a kid, 15, I remember resting all day for my, the Battle of the Band showcase. You know what I mean? I have to be, focused and this and that. And like now, like Sunday, I'm playing 3 shows in a row, and like it's a different. It's more about sort of staying centered and not, just sort of, if I'm lucky, being able to serve the show and serve the audience, and it's really not about me.
It's all about the groove, man, right? I mean, it's like it's about getting into a groove and sharing that experience and letting people feel like this groove and this feel.
Or even more, like just not correcting you, but like for them to be uplifted, for them to be inspired, even better. Like it's one thing if I can be like, man, you're badass, but if you're inspiring me to go make art, that's where it's at.
Yeah, it worked.
That's there was I just have to say there's this incredible podcast I'll plug on here. It's not a Stick Players podcast. It's called the 5049 podcast. Jeremiah Zimmerman, he's this clarinetist, and he interviewed this trumpeter named Peter Evans. And Peter Evans, they were talking about this concept of, which I love, and it's all of our worst fear. I'll speak for myself. It's definitely a fear of mine. It's like, if I stopped playing music, would anybody care? Because there has to be some gravitas in what I'm doing. There has to be some connection. Otherwise, it's like that's the point of playing music. It's not for me to amuse myself, at least for me. I want to connect to people. But I'm also willing to put music out there that doesn't necessarily immediately connect with people. Like I think that there are a lot of functions of music. You know what I mean? Some of it's just a conversation. You know what I mean? The answer might not be coming until later. Andy, you had a question? It says.
Oh, I was gonna wait till we were doing questions, but I can ask it now if you guys.
We're always doing questions.
Okay. Yeah. I know you keep saying that you don't represent the Blue Man Group, but I have a Blue Man Group question.
Okay.
How did the Blue Man Group get onto using Chapman Stick regularly in every show?
That would be actually a great question. My friend Larry Heineman, who's the guy who wrote all the parts, who's a very amazing bass player as well, he liked Tony Levin. And when they were doing the original stuff, I think that he felt that it was right, you know, and it's just that simple.
I only ask because when I saw Blue Man Group, that was my first in-person experience of seeing a Chapman stick.
Oh,
I
wow.
mean, yeah, I mean, I didn't. I knew it was there and I knew it was a Chapman stick, but I mean, I had a long way to come before, today
Where did you see them, Andy?
in Chicago.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's wow. Do you remember who was playing at that point? Did you meet
I
anybody?
have no idea. It was in 2009.
Uh-huh.
It was 2009 or 10. No, 2009. Pretty sure it was 2009.
There's some really, really great musicians who've played that show in particular. Mike Burns is one of them. He has a band called Electric Hawk. Sort of a shorter guy, bald.
I don't think well,
Check them out.
okay.
Check them out. I see you're wearing a Primus T-shirt, and the Tim Alexander played for the show for a little while. Yeah.
Oh, really? I did not know that.
Yeah, Tim is really sweetheart, nice guy, and also Blaza Elias, is that his last name? The guy from Slaughter, drummer.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's interesting, though.
Yeah, a bunch of guys, and Thaddeus Correa, Chick's son, played for the Vegas show, or plays, I guess, for the Vegas show. Yeah. Yep.
So how long has the Vegas show been running? Do you know? I mean, is that...
I don't know. Sorry.
Oh, that's okay.
I don't know.
I'm kind of curious. It seems like
Google it. I
Vegas
really
is
don't know.
one of the places where it would be very popular.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, they did great. They did great. I saw it at the Luxor, and then they were at the Venetian, and now I have no idea where they are. So literally, you probably know as much as I do.
Well, let me switch gears just for a moment. Let's talk about gear for a sec. So, you strike me as the type of person that you play the amp that that the sound company provided. Maybe.
Yes.
It's like if it's there, you probably know in about 5 or 10 seconds. Like, yeah, this will work. Or like, do you have something with a different like speaker or something like that? Like, so like, tell me about like equipment. Like you don't have like some people are very technical. Like Tom G is he like sings a very specific way. But he's not like a flashy player, but he plays and writes original music, and he uses MIDI and he does all this kind of stuff. Tell me a little bit about gear in your setup.
For live playing or for recording?
Either one. Just talk to me about gear for a little bit. Like what
for Chapman stick, right?
Yeah, I suppose, yeah.
So for Chapman stick, I don't remember what amp or direct or whatever when I recorded in '86 or whatever year that was. But I did do some gigs downtown at a club called Rockwood in New York City with a woman named Kamala Shankara, who now has a band called Bombay Ricky. She's a great composer as well. And for that, I just used an acoustic image acoustic image Contra amp. It's a 25-pound amp. The point was I could lift it, and it got a decent sound. That was about it.
Done.
I mean, yeah. No effects. Wait a minute. I'm sorry. That's not true. I think I used... Oh, man. It was like a Digitech, like something I bought from my friend for like $25. Like, really, I'm not like... I love guys who use really, really expensive equipment. The expensive gear that I have, like the most expensive things I have are my stick and my Rick Turner basses. That's it. Yeah, I have 2 Rick Turner basses. But and then recording stick with Sperm Whale, that was through like some crappy interface, like into a PC, like not. I mean, really low tech. I like my bass to sound good. I like to work with good engineers, but like they're the ones who know how to do what they do. I'm not one of these guys who. I have a lot of friends who, and I know that Greg Howard takes a lot of care with his sound, and it sounds great and consistent and all this other stuff. I think what I might do with a stick at this point, like recording in Ableton live at this point, I would probably compress it a little bit. You're not throwing effects on there, but pretty much just compression so that just that the output is a little bit more, uniform.
Mm-hmm.
You know. But so that's for that. For bass, I mean, or guitar, it's really about what the gig is. Generally, I would say that here are my effects. Here's my effect, and here. That I can do a lot just in the position where my hand is relative to pickups and bridge and all that stuff. I have a lot of tools. But that all that being said, when I played fretless guitar or fretless piccolo bass or whatever, I definitely I have line 6. I have like the guitar pod, bass pod, and I have the controller, and I'll use it for for distortion, for reverb, for some of that stuff. But I'm not really like, yeah, I am that guy that you talked about, which is essentially, as a player, it's more like, is that on? Okay, great. And that's it. I mean, I have no barriers to going right through the PA.
Mm-hmm.
None.
Okay.
Yeah. It's not really, there are people I know. This one band, Sleepy Time Gorilla Museum, they're a San Francisco band. That bass player, very specific sound. You know what I mean? But if I had a tech, if I had other people lifting my gear, then sure, I'd have the SVT and all that
Yeah.
stuff. But, yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
But if it's just me humping it, I'm getting on the subway with my Rick Turner bass, which weighs less than 7 pounds.
Yeah. And that's that, like a 1/4-inch cable, like.
Yeah. And tuner. Snark and a snark. Actually, I think that is one thing that's worth mentioning. That the snark tuner is probably the greatest musical invention in the last 10 to 20 years.
So now, I not to be a jerk, but I bought the new snark right here.
Okay. Yeah.
So this is the new one.
Yeah.
And it broke after 2 days.
Yeah. I don't like those. I like this one. Same one that Andy had. I like this one.
So yeah, I'm taking this one back. I thought this one was so cool because the way it fits on the stick, actually, and Andy, you can probably do this. So they have these things called, there's lapdogs. You can pop this right into the lapdog, and it doesn't actually get in the way of the lapdog or the instrument, and so your instrument doesn't have this crazy-looking octopus arm hanging off of it. And then what I liked about this one also was that you can also just clip it on the head right there, and you barely even see it, right? And you can see perfectly the little screen on the back. But the thing is that it lasted like 3 days, and so I'm actually going to Guitar Center probably this evening to take it back and get one that you have that works.
Mm-hmm.
To interject on that, I bought one of the new NS Design ones, the really, really low profile ones, and it works great for bass and it works great for guitar, but it doesn't hold on the stick hard enough, so it doesn't get a good signal to tune. But I guess I don't have it in here, but it's nice because it's like this big. It's like an inch big, and you would never see it ever. Like it's like impossible to see unless you're like right in front of the instrument, which is neat. But it doesn't clip strong enough, unfortunately.
Well, I'm looking. I know what I like about what you guys are saying about the snark is that it's like you work with it, Tom. Like I understand, like for you, this is like a screwdriver or a hammer or something. You use this thing every day, and you probably bang it around. So, and that's what I'm looking for, is something that's dependable.
Yeah. And there's no shame, in, for me at least, in somebody seeing that I'm tuning my instrument silently. That's not an issue.
Yeah. I was hoping to get something that wouldn't have to hang off the headstock, because
right.
if I put it in my bag, it falls off and then I lose it. So
this one can go on pickup.
If you go to Amazon, these were like $8. So.
Okay. Well, it's already paid for a Guitar Center. I'm just going to march down there with my receipt, which I've got right here. I mean, I'm ready.
The thing that kills me about when I went into Guitar Center, they asked me if I wanted a tuner for bass or for other instruments, and that just tells me that the person serving me has no idea what they're selling me. So, but anyway, so other questions? Or
so yeah, okay. So we're getting kind of close to the end of our time here.
Yeah.
So we usually try to cover, how you came to the instrument, what you like about the instrument, other players, stuff you like to listen to. Oh, let's. And then we talked about your role in music education. We talked briefly about come join the band. We didn't talk too much about Kids Creative Summer Camp, but that's something you're still doing and actively involved
I
in.
did that 2 years in a row. It's basically, it was an extension of the Come Join the Band program, and although the advantage is we got to work with the kids 3 or 4 days a week, which is great, and I have a bunch of, this one little drummer who's 9 who can play a groove, and so we got to work and, do some stuff. Yeah, that it's all sort of, I mean, if I, I don't know about you guys, but like I'm sort of essentially freelancing everything, so it's about keeping balls in the air, It's about
Absolutely.
keeping balls in the air, which, freelancing it's hard because you really have to be able to think ahead and and then be able to sort of react in real time when this gig or that gig falls through.
Well, and just communication, like communication skills. Like, let's be honest, I may or may not be able to make this gig. How important is it?
Right.
And you work at a whole nother level where you've got like guys with the A seat or the B seat. You have this regional gig, and then also you probably want to do other things as well. Like when you want to
Absolutely.
travel.
Yeah. I mean, I'm an MD on a whole bunch of other projects. I've done a whole bunch of albums over the last couple of years, including my Bloody Valentine album.
Okay.
We're doing Richard and Linda Thompson's Shoot Out the Lights, November 2nd. I'm playing Fretless 5 on that. I have a gospel project, Lizzie and the Sinners, which is a great 8-piece band. What else? A jazz group with a great jazz drummer, Bob Meyer, called 26-2, and that's a lot of my tunes. What else?
Well, what about the recent project that you had, the ambient kind of heavy?
Oh yeah. That is called Dark Ages. Now there are many Dark Ages on Bandcamp, so I will give the URL, which is Dark Ages, DARKAGES NYC. So Dark Ages NYC is one word. .bandcamp.com.
Okay, accept no substitutes. Dark Ages NYC.
.com.
Okay.
.bandcamp.com, and you can stream the whole album for free, and if you like it, you can buy it.
Cool.
Either one track or all of it, and that album has 2 bass players in the band. Me and bass player Jesse Krakow, who played actually stick bass with the band Time of Orchid.
Okay.
Who are in Sadik.
Cool. Okay, so he's in the club.
Mm-hmm. He is. He's now. I mean, really, you should interview Jesse because Jesse is one bad boy.
Well, I'll hit you up. I mean, because there's a whole bunch of guys. It's fun to hear. I'm such a freaking fanboy about the stick. Sometimes I forget people use this thing to live their lives with and pay their bills with. And I'm an IT guy working out of my garage. And I really like the stick. I like it a lot.
That's good.
And I'm fascinated with the people that play it, and you are a member of a very small club of people that kind of hung on and played music professionally, and I have a lot of friends that do that. A cat named Chris Joyner and Jeremy Razumna, who plays with Fits and the Tantrums, and
sure, I love them. Yeah. But I mean, I'll say with that too is that I think you said it's tenacity, and if anybody was looking for inspiration or advice, it's just like keep, I think that one of the best lessons I ever learned from was an old musician at Blue Man who said to me, give your music away, Like basically what I do is I have a SoundCloud page, I put up music all the time, I put up ideas all the time, I get feedback. I get DJs all over the world downloading some of it. I don't know if they're sampling it or whatever, but it's sort of nice to see that people are listening. And like I count myself lucky. I do work at playing music, but like I consider myself extremely lucky that I actually can go and play to people who are actually appreciating what I have to give them, and pay my rent,
So
both.
on that note, Tom, and Andy, unless there's anything else that you had that you wanted to add, did you have any questions for Tom?
Go ahead. If I think of something, I'll say something.
Okay. Well, I'm getting ready to wrap up because we're
all right.
So we're going to air this in November. This month we're featuring a lot of Australian players. So we had Andy Salvanos on last week. We're going to try a rebroadcast of Conrad Park. We had Elliot McCann on. We'll do Scott Neville, record him this evening and put that out tomorrow. So this whole month we're featuring Australian stick players. And then, Tom, this show will come on in November along with Michael Bernier, who's a very high-profile player who played with Tony and Stickmen, and a really cool cat who's also in music education. Yeah, so,
that's really cool.
So I suppose what I wanted to ask you, kind of in closing, is, I mean, you've already kind of shared it with us. Is like what sort of advice? You kind of gave it to us. I was going to ask you, what kind of advice do you have for young players, just musicians, not necessarily stick players?
I think the best piece of advice I ever got. Well, okay. So the best piece of advice that I learned when I was pretty young, reading it in Guitar Player, was listen to as much music as you can. That it's really important. I used to go to the library and take out all the, and I think people do this naturally, much more naturally now, I would look at my favorite players' influences and sort of go along those trees, those skill trees. It's like, wow, Stanley Clarke. Well, who did he listen to? And Stravinsky. Well, who influenced Stravinsky? And then where is this from? And so that's one thing. And then the other part of it is to play with other musicians. Don't stay in your basement or your whatever. Don't get your music out there and be willing to take input from other people. Don't, connect with other people, because that's, for me, that they don't have to approve, but I think it's important that I air my music out. That the mistake that I made is, that I wanted to get something perfect, or I thought an idea was going to work, but guess what? Like, if we decide to do the gig, the three of us, tonight, we're going to find out if it works. You know what I mean? And then, once I know that information, then I can go to the next place. It's some very, very practical stuff. Like, don't stay in your head. Get out in the world, and it's okay not to be perfect. I'm definitely not.
Right. That's half the I guess the battle of learning is like just failing miserably.
Yes, that's right. You have to be willing to. There's comics. I've listened to a lot of comedy podcasts over the last couple of years, and there's a saying that to become a good comic, you have to be willing to bomb 100 times on stage. So, if you're gigging once a month, think about that. That's 10 years.
Yeah.
A bump. and really, how much guts do we have? Do you have, are you okay with realizing, okay, maybe that doesn't work?
Maybe it was me. Maybe it wasn't the drummer.
Right. Maybe that idea was a great idea, but I didn't really, or maybe I'm not communicating my idea very well. But that's okay. I think it was the hardest thing for me when I was 15, 16. People saying, play with the bass drum, and I'm thinking, why? Now I realize it's like, that it's sort of it grounds things, So it's a weird sort of interdependence thing. It's sort of having my own ideas, but being willing to take input from other people, because if I had sort of gone off on Planet Tom, there were some good ideas, but I think that they're much better ideas once they've been aired out, in the light,
I see. Cool.
So,
well, Tom, I want to thank you very much. I love the way that you said that, and it looks like, Andy, is there anything you want to say in parting here?
Yeah, thanks, Tom. I really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure.
Yeah. So we'll definitely send some links along. We'll try to promote darkagesnyc.bandcamp.com as best we can, and as always, I'll send a link over from the Stickist as well. We'd love to see you out in the Stickist if ever you get a chance. Like I said, Blue Man Group is a hot topic always, and you're our kind of connection into that realm. So we may have more questions for you.
Okay, anytime.
Great. Well, thanks again, Tom. Take care,
All right,
man.
you guys. Take
Happy
care.
Free Hands Friday, everyone.
All right, metal.